One king claimed to rule all of Britain. 5 armies gathered to prove him wrong. In the autumn of 1937, on a field whose exact location would later fade from memory, 2 forces assembled before dawn. The land itself would be called Brunanburh, but its name mattered less than what would be settled there. On one side stood the English, perhaps 20,000 men drawn from a realm never before unified. Wessex, Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, men of different dialects and grudges now under one banner. At their center stood Æthelstan, king of the English, grandson of Alfred the Great. Barely 40 years old, he was already the most powerful ruler since Rome left the island. Across the field stood something unprecedented. Not one army, but a coalition. Scots from Alba, Vikings from Dublin, and Britons from Strathclyde stood together. Their banners told the story clearly. This was not conquest for profit, but resistance. They had gathered for a single reason. If Æthelstan stood, none of them would. This was not a raid, nor a feud between kings, but a final attempt to break English power. Between the 2 armies lay open ground, but beneath it lay the future of the island. If the English line broke, Britain would return to division, instability, and endless contest. If it held, something entirely new would survive the day. No one on that field spoke of nations or destiny before nightfall changed everything. The drums began to beat, and the moment England was decided finally arrived. For centuries, the island the Romans had called Britannia was not a nation. It was a patchwork. Anglo-Saxon kingdoms controlled the south and east. Wessex, Mercia, East Anglia, and Northumbria. Each was ruled by its own king, each suspicious of the others. To the north lay Alba, the kingdom of the Scots. To the west, Britons held Wales and Strathclyde. Along coasts and river valleys, Norse settlers carved out their own realms. Dublin was a Viking city, and the Danelaw cut across England like a scar. No single ruler commanded the whole island, and no central authority endured. Power was local, fragile, and constantly contested. The idea of a united England was not tradition, not destiny, but an anomaly. Even the strongest kings ruled only fragments of territory. Alliances shifted, borders moved, kingdoms rose and collapsed within a generation. What endured was division. This balance of weakness had one advantage. No kingdom could dominate for long, but it left the island vulnerable, fractured internally, and exposed to foreign power. That was the world Æthelstan inherited. He was born into a Britain where unity had always failed. Authority reached only as far as a sword could enforce it. Kings defended borders rather than reshaped the map. What followed would break that pattern. Æthelstan was born in the 890s, the son of Edward the Elder and the grandson of Alfred the Great. Alfred had saved Wessex from destruction, and Edward had expanded its power across southern England. Neither of them had claimed all of England under a single crown. Æthelstan did. When he took the throne in 1924, he moved with speed that stunned his rivals. Mercia was absorbed, and Northumbria, the last Viking kingdom in England, was conquered. Norse rulers were driven back across the Irish Sea as English authority pushed north and west. By 1927, Æthelstan styled himself King of the English, not as a title but as fact. For the first time since Rome, one ruler controlled land from the Channel to the Scottish border. This was not symbolism. It was enforcement. Welsh princes were compelled to submit and pay tribute under English authority. Borders were fixed, and law followed conquest rather than negotiation. Æthelstan ruled by command, not by loose allegiance or temporary compromise. His power reached farther than any English king before him, and farther than neighbors could tolerate. In Scotland, Constantine II watched England's expansion with growing alarm. He had ruled for decades and understood what unchecked power would eventually bring. Æthelstan had already forced him into public submission at Emont Bridge. Constantine had knelt and sworn oaths, but submission did not mean acceptance. If Æthelstan consolidated his realm, Scotland would not remain a rival, but a target. To the west, the King of Strathclyde saw the same future unfolding before him. England controlled Northumbria, Wales was subdued, and Strathclyde stood surrounded. Across the Irish Sea, Olaf Guthfrithson of Dublin watched these events with dread. Grandson of Ivar the Boneless, he saw more than political defeat approaching. He saw extinction as the Viking Age in Britain drew to a close. York had fallen, the Danelaw was gone, and Norse kings were losing ground. If England remained united, there would be no place left for Norse kings. Æthelstan had not declared war on his neighbors, but by succeeding, he had made war inevitable. 3 kings reached the same conclusion at the same time. If Æthelstan was not stopped now, he never would be. Constantine of Scotland brought hardened warriors shaped by Norse raids and endless border wars. They understood shield walls, endurance, and how to survive long battles without breaking. Olaf Guthfrithson crossed from Ireland with Vikings from Dublin, young men hungry for reconquest. They were fighters whose fathers had ruled northern England before being driven out. For them, this was not strategy. It was revenge. Owen of Strathclyde joined them with his Britons, his kingdom exposed and vulnerable. If England turned west, Strathclyde would fall quickly, with no refuge remaining. Their motivations differed, but their fears were identical. Together, they assembled the greatest coalition ever formed against English power. Their numbers matched Æthelstan's army, perhaps even exceeded it. They intended to strike before England could absorb its newest conquests. The plan was direct: invade from the north and force battle immediately. Destroy the English king and divide his realm before it hardened into permanence. This was not an alliance of ambition, but an alliance of last chances. In the summer of 1937, the coalition gathered near the northern border of England. Æthelstan received word of their advance and did not hesitate. He called his banners, and men came from every corner of his realm. Lords and thangs, household troops, and feared-men marched under one command. Former enemies now marched together, bound by necessity rather than loyalty. Æthelstan moved north with his brother Edmund at his side. Barely 20, Edmund was already tested in war. The future of the dynasty marched with the army. Somewhere in the north, the two forces converged. There would be no negotiation and no withdrawal once contact was made. What followed would decide whether England remained an experiment or became permanent. The coalition arrived first, reaching the chosen battlefield before the English host. Constantine, Olaf, and Owen chose their ground carefully, prioritizing space for superior numbers. They wanted no narrow passes, no choke points, nothing to limit their numerical advantage. They found an open northern stretch, gently sloped and wide enough for massive battle lines. Visibility was clear. Maneuver was possible, terrain suited perfectly for massed armies. The coalition commanders met the night before battle to decide their approach. Constantine urged patience, letting the English advance uphill and tire themselves. Olaf pressed for aggression, demanding an early strike to smash the English shield wall. Owen argued for unity above all, warning they could not afford internal division. They agreed on a simple plan, direct and without subtlety. Form a massive line, absorb the English advance, then envelop and destroy them. Across the field, Æthelstan faced a different and more dangerous problem. His army was unified by command, not by shared history or tradition. Men of Wessex stood beside Mercians who had once fought against them. Northumbrians stood beside the men who had conquered their lands. Fearedmen, farmers, and craftsmen stood behind professional warriors trained since youth. This army had never fought together at this scale before. Æthelstan did not attempt deception or clever positioning before the battle. He did not gamble on maneuver or tactical surprise. Instead, Æthelstan chose endurance as his strategy. The English deployed in deep formation, preparing to absorb enormous pressure. The strongest troops held the center, Æthelstan's household warriors hardened by campaigns. Trusted commanders held the wings, with Edmund commanding one flank. The opposite flank was entrusted to proven leaders with battlefield experience. The feared filled the rear ranks, numerous but not elite. They were ready to step forward when the front ranks inevitably fell. That night, Æthelstan walked among his men without speeches or promises. He did not speak of glory or promise survival to those who followed him. He did not need to, because they already understood what defeat meant. At dawn, the lines formed across the field in silence. The coalition stretched across the field, a vast wall of shields and banners. Scots held the center, Vikings the right, and Britons the left. Thousands of men stood silent, waiting for the first movement. Opposite them stood the English, fewer in number but tighter in formation. Their shields locked edge to edge, leaving no gaps. Between the armies lay open ground of grass, stone, and mud. Soon, none of that ground would matter. The horns sounded, cutting through the silence. Both armies advanced toward each other. The collision was immediate and brutally violent. Shields splintered and iron struck iron in deafening chaos. Thousands of voices merged into a single roar that erased thought. The Vikings struck first, surging forward with speed and fury. Olaf's men slammed into the English left with relentless force. Axes rose and fell as Norse battle cries echoed across the field. The English line bent under pressure but did not break. Shields held as spears stabbed over rims into the mass. Men were dragged down, trampled, and crushed beneath the press. In the center, the Scots advanced with discipline and restraint. Constantine's warriors moved step by step, shield wall unbroken. They did not rush, but pressed forward with patience. The English center met them head-on without yielding ground. For long moments, nothing moved as bodies crushed together. Men gasped for breath, unable to retreat or advance. Strength mattered, but endurance mattered more. Then killing began in earnest across the lines. Spears thrust blindly and axes hooked shields downward. Men in the front ranks died quickly, crushed and suffocated. Those behind shoved forward, adding more crushing weight. When one man fell, another stepped immediately into his place. On the English right, Edmund faced Owen's desperate Britons. They attacked relentlessly, knowing their kingdom faced extinction. Edmund countered again and again, rallying men and reforming lines. The battle dissolved into noise, dust, blood, and confusion. Commands vanished beneath the roar of fighting. Men fought by instinct and training alone. When someone fell, there was no pause, because stopping meant death. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher above the field. Casualties mounted into the hundreds, then far beyond. Æthelstan fought in the center, not from safety, but within the shield wall. He killed when enemies broke through and steadied men who faltered. By standing visible, he made himself both leader and target. Constantine did the same, standing in the front rank despite his age. Past 60, he had fought his life for Scotland's independence. He would not abandon the field now, nor would his men. Neither side yielded as the shield walls ground together. The balance did not shift suddenly. It eroded over time. On the coalition's right, the Vikings had spent themselves. Hours of furious assault had achieved nothing. Their best warriors lay dead in the mud. Attacks slowed, hesitation appeared, and men began to look back. The English left still held its ground. In the center, the Scots were pushed back inch by inch. Constantine's wall remained intact, but ground was steadily lost. The English center did not retreat as fresh men rotated forward. Discipline replaced desperation within the English ranks. On the coalition's left, Owen's Britons began to falter. Edmund sensed weakness and pressed the attack harder. Reserves were committed as counterattacks grew more violent. The Britons were driven back, bloodied and exhausted. The coalition had gambled everything on breaking the English early. They had failed. Æthelstan saw the hesitation, the fatigue, and the loss of belief. If he waited, the enemy might disengage and regroup tomorrow. Numbers would still favor them if the battle continued. This had to end now. Æthelstan raised his sword. Not a cautious push, but a decisive and violent drive. Shields drove into weakened lines as defenders became attackers. The Vikings were struck from front and flank, their formation collapsing. In the center, the Scots felt the pressure explode violently. The shield wall fractured as retreat turned into panic. Constantine tried to rally his men, but it was too late. The coalition line broke completely across the field. Once broken, it could not be repaired. Once the line broke, there was no recovery for the coalition forces. The Vikings were the first to collapse completely under English pressure. Caught between advancing English forces, their formation disintegrated rapidly. Warriors who fought bravely all day suddenly found themselves surrounded. Some died where they stood, while others turned and ran. The retreat spread outward across the battlefield. In the center, the Scots began to fall back in disorder. Constantine tried forming a new line, shouting orders and pulling men together. The momentum had shifted as English forces broke into the rear. Warriors dropped shields to run faster as discipline vanished entirely. On the left, Owen's Britons broke completely and fled north. Many were cut down as the English pursued with determination. Olaf Guthrum escaped alive, but his army was utterly destroyed. Constantine withdrew in better order, yet his defeat was complete. His son lay dead on the field, killed during the final English advance. As daylight faded, The exhausted English slowed their pursuit and stopped. Wounded and broken themselves, they did not chase into darkness. The battle was over. As the sun set over Brunanburh, the field revealed its truth. Thousands of bodies lay scattered across the ground, mixed together in death. Scots, Vikings, and Britons lay together as they had an alliance. Weapons lay broken, and banners were trampled deep into the mud. Æthelstan walked among the fallen, searching for his own men. Lords, thegns, and warriors who had followed him through years of conquest. Many of them would never return home from this field. Edmund found his brother near the center of the field. Both were covered in blood, and there was nothing to say. As darkness fell, the English buried or burned their dead. The coalition's fallen were left where they lay as an unspoken message. By morning, the survivors of the coalition were already gone. They fled for Scotland, Strathclyde, and ships bound for Dublin. They carried the task of explaining how the invasion had failed. No new alliance formed, and no second army followed. The challenge to England's survival was finally over. Brunanburh did not matter because of where it was fought. Its location would be argued for centuries and never fully agreed upon. It mattered because of what the battle proved to everyone watching. Æthelstan's kingdom survived its first and greatest test of survival. An army drawn from different peoples fought as one and held. England was no longer an experiment after that day. After Brunanburh, the Vikings would never again challenge English rule seriously. The Scots withdrew behind their borders, their ambitions checked. Strathclyde faded slowly as an independent power. The island did not become peaceful, but it became decided. England was not born in a treaty or negotiated agreement. It was not proclaimed in a coronation ceremony. It was forged in one day of violence and endurance. Thousands died believing their cause was just and necessary. 5 armies had come to destroy a single kingdom. The kingdom endured when all others fell away. From that silent, blood-soaked field, the Age of England began.